I thought I had a toothache really bad, and I went to the dentist, and the dentist said, "Oh no, you've got sinusitis. Actually, you need antibiotics." And it was a real test because I thought, okay, yes, I'm supposed to take these antibiotics. And one of my school fellow students said, "Well, why don't you take some herbal medicine?" And it was my first actual experience. Even though I wanted to be a medical herbalist, I hadn't really thought through what it'd be like. And I took this herbal medicine for this terrible pain in my face. And I got better, and just so quickly and easily. And yeah, it was a really interesting introduction into how herbal medicine is so amazing.
A big welcome to you, Anita. Please start by introducing yourself.
Oh, thank you very much, Rosemary. My name is Anita Ralph, and I'm a medical herbalist, a practitioner of herbal medicine. I'm a fellow of the National Institute of Medical Herbalists and a member of the College of Practitioners of Phytotherapists. And I suppose I see myself mainly as a practitioner of herbal medicine, seeing patients and offering them not just herbal medicine, but a herbal way of thinking about their bodies. I'm also a tutor of herbal medicine. I've been a tutor for over a decade for the Scottish School of Herbal Medicine, and now I'm a tutor for Hartwood. In fact, with my friend Mary Tassel, medical herbalist, we wrote and created a 1-year foundation course, an introduction to herbal medicine, which can be for people who are just really, really interested in herbal medicine or as a stepping stone into professional training. And we've also written together an advanced foundation course looking at genitourinary health
Oh, wow.
from a herbal medicine perspective, because it's one of those really common areas that we see in practice. And I've collaborated for 20 years now with a gynaecologist, a wonderful woman called Anne Henderson, who is now working mainly as a menopause expert.
Mm.
And that's led to collaborations with other conventional practitioners and other consultants. And that led me to research and write up, a study that I conducted in my practice, looking at the experience of women going through menopause and how they found herbal medicine treatment. So I published my paper in the Journal of Herbal Medicine in 2020. And I have 2 books. One is a 1-year sort of textbook accompaniment to the foundation course, but it is for anybody with a serious but new interest in herbal medicine. And I also wrote the chapter on herbal medicine for Anne Henderson's book, Natural Menopause. So, yeah, I think I've been busy.
You've been very busy. It's all great stuff. It's all great to hear. I know in terms of like herbalism, what got me into it was just seeing how practical it was. It was everyday tools to improve and to enhance my well-being and those around me. What kind of attracted you to herbalism?
Oh, Rosemary, there were many threads, I think, that converged and ultimately led me to discover that you could even train as a medical herbalist. But because I was at school when I realised that it was possible to do something like that. In fact, I think ecology was a major reason that I was fascinated about our planet and nature, and I really wanted to do something in life that contributed to the balance and health of our ecosystem. But I was also interested in health, and there was a real wave of veganism and vegetarianism when I was at school in the 1980s. There was a real surge of interest in sort of eating differently and well for all sorts of reasons, for health and for ecology. So I think that was a factor. I went off to train to become a medical herbalist straight from school. And while I was a student, I thought I had a toothache really bad, and I went to the dentist, and the dentist said, "Oh no, you've got sinusitis. Actually, you need antibiotics." And it was a real test because I thought, okay, yes, I'm supposed to take these antibiotics. And one of my school fellow students said, "Well, why don't you take some herbal medicine?" And it was my first actual experience. Even though I wanted to be a medical herbalist, I hadn't really thought through what it'd be like. And I took this herbal medicine for this terrible pain in my face. and I got better, and just so quickly and easily. And yeah, it was a really interesting introduction into how herbal medicine is so amazing.
I can second that actually, because sometimes you think, did that really work, or did I just that placebo? Because that works a bit too well, a bit too good. But no, that just shows the power of plants. I mean, even most of the medicine that's used nowadays, the active ingredient has been taken from plants. That's kind of where they got their inspiration from. So absolutely herbs work, but in just such a clever way. They kind of work their magic together. It's not just one active ingredient that's kind of doing the job. There's a whole host of things, working together. When you're working with women who have period issues, what's your sort of technique, or what's your way of addressing the issue?
Well, I think that's a really good question because, again, I think there's a slight misunderstanding sometimes that herbal medicine is just a natural version of drugs, that these monochemicals, if we could find a herb equivalent of this drug, maybe it'd be safer and kinder to our bodies. But in fact, herbal medicine is all about a different way of thinking and a different way of looking at the interconnectedness of our body. And so, one of the very first things that I love to do is to hear a person's story in the consultation, hear what happened, how did it start, and what happened along the way, and to this point in time where this person is coming along to consult with me. And for me, it's about weaving back together the story for that person first off, and to share with them my excitement about physiology. I realise that I am fascinated and enjoy the study of how the body works, and so my poor patients have to endure that for a bit. But I think, but actually, so often patients will comment that actually understanding what's going on in their body is hugely empowering. So that's step one: is, hey, did you know that your bowel lies right next to your ovary, and that your bladder is lying close to your uterus, and so on? And that these tissues are moist and interconnected. They transfer microbes backward and forth. If there is spasm in one area or inflammation, it might transfer to another. And it's that interconnectedness that helps people see that they do need to sort out their digestive problem to help their period, or their recurrent urinary tract infection to sort out their period. And yeah, so my approach is very much about casting the net wide, looking at the whole, looking at our sleep, our nervous system, our diet, our joy for life, our exercise, our rest, and looking at how that might impact on such a dynamic part of our body. My goodness, there's so much taking place in a monthly cycle, or in pregnancy, of course. It's dynamic, isn't it? Nothing's staying still, everything's constantly in motion. And so I think that's why herbal medicine is so important for women, so important, and really should be offered de facto for women across the world, not just this linear, conventional, paternalistic medical science.
No,
I
I
went off
agree.
there, Rosemary.
No, 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 no. I agree. That was perfect. And in terms of being offered, I think it should be part of the curriculum. Like it forms part of the world around us. When you're going for walks, you're looking at life, you're looking at medicine, you're looking at, our allies that just help us without even knowing it. I think it's something that children should be learning from, babies should be learning. It's part of life. It's part of growing up. You mentioned something about hearing their story, hearing your patient's story. And I think that's so important, because that's often something they don't get to express when they go to allopathic medicine. And oftentimes that's usually how they end up working with people like us, because they just haven't really gotten the help that they're looking for. And sometimes, I mean, and you can't really, when you go to a GP and you've only got like 4 minutes or something to tell your story, that's just not enough time to unpack the root causes. That's really what we're dealing with here. It's the root causes, what's been going on. And I agree as well. Sometimes when you hear their story and you kind of feed back to them what they've said, in some ways I find, I'm not sure if you can relate, but like when you sometimes reflect what they've said to you, sometimes you can see them like joining the pieces together. Like, when you say sort of when did it start? And it would be something like, it was 2 years ago, my grandmother died. And then you can kind of see them like, that's kind of where everything started, unraveling, and
Mm.
their gut issues started, or they just, the fogginess, the lethargy started. You can kind of see, and I love that because they are the drivers in their own health. They are the ones, healing themselves. We obviously help facilitate that, but I love the fact that they are the ones, directing that healing with the help of the herbs, you know? You mentioned physiology as well, and one of the things that helps, like, gets me excited is physiology in pregnancy, and just how all of that happens, and just really how it happens beautifully when left alone. Because sadly, I see a lot of interfering, having worked in hospitals. Have you done any work with pregnant women to support them with herbal medicine?
Over the yeah, I've been in practice for almost 35 years, and yeah, I've had the great honour of accompanying many women through their pregnancy. Quite often, those women have sought out a herbalist to help them conceive in the first place,
Hmm.
because I've seen a lot of people with polycystic ovarian syndrome or other gynecological issues. And I think that's something I'd love to say about what you just said there, which is I think it requires another headspace. That, did you know that you might actually be able to get better, that your body might actually be able to recover and start to work normally? So many of us start out on a sort of false footing with our periods, maybe being put on the pill really young in life. And so, yeah, by the time people start to realize that they're ready to conceive, a lot of people realize that it isn't as smooth and straightforward, because they need a little bit of nurturing and so on. And I think that's what herbal medicine offers, that step into pregnancy. And then when people have experienced herbal medicine already, they really they know that they are safe and held, and they're with a trusted practitioner for their pregnancy itself. And so many of those women will stay. Although, like you, I notice that I like to do as little as possible in pregnancy, and often I'm not really using very much herbally at all, but more a case of bringing plants into the diet, into simple teas, or just observing what the body is doing and how it's changing week on week and month on month, and just showing people that they could just encourage what the body is naturally doing, maybe, but just with something really gentle, chamomile, nettle, and so on.
And to sort of spring off that, it's sometimes there's also a tendency, or it's very easy to pathologize something but using herbs, and we don't really need to do that. Oftentimes, even I remember I had one patient who, or client who, she had been on the pill for such a long time. So when she came to me, she was having like recurrent UTIs, recurrent thrush. Her gut had just been just thrown off, by being on the pill. And I think she was probably expecting me to like make a whole concoction of stuff. And honestly, we just went back to basics. There was such a focus on foods and the diet and probiotics and just restoring that environment. And I think the main herb I gave her, probably the only thing, was cinnamon, cinnamon tea, because it's a standalone powerhouse, to be honest. Like, I love cinnamon. And for the reproductive system, I think it's just such a great herb. But we did so much dietary work and food work. And, let's go back to basics. What are your favorite foods? How do we prepare them? Just kind of just going back to that and forming a love for the foods and the way we prepare our foods. and the sort of ritual that goes into waking up every morning, drinking something that you've maybe soaked in water the night before, whether it's like coriander seeds or okra water, or depending on like the culture that I'm working with. But yeah, it's just going back to dietary basics, I find.
Yeah, I think you're so right, Rosemary. And also that recognition of lost foods, forgotten foods, foods from ancestors past. Even so, nettles, for example. Perhaps some people do still eat nettles here in our busy technological British society, but I bet you a lot of people don't, and they would have been an absolutely crucial food and medicine. I love that connection between those two things, that we forget that plants are not just one chemical, they have all these other beautiful compounds that with side benefits,
Mm.
whether it be fiber or actually every plant has its own microbiome. So when we take a plant inside of us, it contributes to our microbiome. Or there are minute quantities of anti-inflammatory or antispasmodic compounds, even in food like herbs, as you say, aromatic herbs like cinnamon and basil and coriander and mint. Oh, beautiful stuff.
You mentioned a few moments ago about PCOS. When you work, Anita, do you have ways of looking at certain conditions from an energetic space? Are you just looking at what's in front of you in terms of the symptoms and obviously what the story is? But I know some practitioners like to sort of like draw energetics in terms of what this represents, in terms of like the emotional perspective of why this person might be having a certain condition. Do you work in that type of way?
I
Oh,
do. I
yeah.
do. Although I'm not entirely committed to one type of energy. And I think it's that irrepressible enthusiasm once again for understanding physiology. And if you can do that from a multitude of languages, it's
Mm.
very empowering for you and your patient. So I am really interested in concepts from traditional Chinese medicine, from Ayurveda, from humoral practice, and from modern conventional biomedicine. And
Mhm.
I find that sometimes when you see a person, one of one particular system will particularly resonate in that person's unique case. So most of all, I'm seeking to convey understanding. I want that person to understand what's going on in their body and what we need to change to enable the body to repair. And so I'm going to choose the language that I think will best suit the person,
Mm.
and also see the interconnections really clearly, so that in a way they're leaving the room already thinking about how they're going to heal themselves, and that the herbs are there to accompany them as wise beings, as living beings that are contributing to a change in direction, but ultimately are guided by the person as well as their herbalist nudging them along that path.
Mm. Mm. No, that story, that question came to mind because I recently, sort of within the pregnancy space, I heard a story about a lady who had hyperemesis, so extreme vomiting, and it just wouldn't stop. It kind of went on for a while. And she saw a practitioner who sort of does like energy healing work, and basically kind of came to the conclusion that she had unresolved trauma from when she was 4 years old, when her father left, and that had just never been dealt with. And she had so much anger towards her mother because she thought it was her mum's fault. And the day after she had that consultation, when she came to that realization, the vomiting just stopped, which I just think is just amazing because and this is again kind of where allopathic medicine just really falls short in a way. And even for like myself, I'm always learning because there's always a reason, there's always something that has triggered whatever that condition is. I always say, sort of, I liken conditions to So you've got a big tree, and then you've got many leaves. You've got a tree trunk, many leaves coming from that, or branches and leaves. And you can call one IBS, you can call one hair loss, period pains. Just there's so many things you can call it, but it's all stemming from the same root system. It all goes back to the same root. So it almost doesn't matter what we call certain conditions. It's come from somewhere, but you never really get to explore when this happens and the story behind it.
That's just a beautiful story, actually, Rosemary, and really resonates with my experience and practice as
Mm.
well. That there, you might have somebody with vomiting, and that from a very conventional medical viewpoint, you might look at that as being coming from the liver or the kidney or maybe a gut infection, etc. But that using the much broader, more poetic language of traditional practice, you start to realize that there are emotions and seasons and temperatures and so on associated with each organ and organ system and tissue that then could lead you down that path. And yeah, we, as a herbalist, I find myself wanting and loving to collaborate with lots of other different therapists, whether, yeah, from healing through to psychotherapy, touch therapies. Yeah, what an amazing provision if health was truly offered in such a holistic sense.
That would be so, it would just be wholesome,
Yeah.
because we in terms of like thinking of different systems, again, within the hospital space, like I might see a pregnant woman who has been sent to an endocrinologist for something, and then but they then said no, you need to see a neurologist, and there's all these different branches. But again, we are not disconnected beings, we're very whole beings. And again, going back to that root system, it's all come from one place. We're not, you can't sort of send your arm off to work while you remain at home. No, everything goes together, everything follows, everything is one. You mentioned seasons, and one of my favorite ways of also looking at the cycle is in seasons. So for example, like the menstruation, like when we come on our period, that's kind of like the winter phase where we kind of want to hibernate and we want more nourishing foods that just kind of give us a hug from the inside. Do you look at cycles in that way, or how do you sort of, yeah, how do you resonate with it?
Illustrating a menstrual cycle for young people, you talked about reaching out when people are still at school. This is exactly what we want our children to not feel shame, not feel embarrassment, and to embrace their cycle. And also for those who are not having menstrual cycles, for boys to also understand about how their kin are experiencing the world in these cycles, because that would then maybe translate into better work practices and societal practices too, to allow that fuller expression of the menstrual cycle.
Mm.
Yeah, it's a beautiful podcast with the two wonderful therapists, Alexandra Pope and Sonia Wurlitzer. They have been
Mm.
running something called Red School, which you can see their book Wild Power on the menstrual cycles. They use
Mm.
that seasonal approach, but it's really interesting they've drawn on that, because I think lots of people have seen that across the centuries,
Mm.
our menstrual cycles. When I first graduated, Rosemary, I went back to my old school with an independent midwife, and we gave a talk to the sixth
Oh,
form
wow.
about periods and about menstrual cycles. And I remember those beautiful girls, they were horrified. they, they were like, ugh. And I remember this wonderful, wonderful independent midwife that I went with. She said, well, take a look, get a mirror and have a look at yourself. And again, just even the shame of
Mm.
women to see what they look like, let alone to go through those cycles. And I would love to see change there, where there's a much more open-hearted discussion about what actually your womb is and what's going on. And
Mm,
I have women coming to me in their 30s, 40s, and 50s who say, I did not know that's what was happening
mm.
inside my body every month.
Yeah.
that's that's so common. And
Absolutely.
yeah, and when you do that, and then you see how a herbal medicine approach could actually regulate your cycle.
Hmm.
I've had women where their periods have stopped, but they restart when they start taking herbal medicine because they're in their 20s or 30s. They should be having a menstrual cycle. I've had women told that they've got really, really heavy periods, they have to have a hysterectomy. No, they take some herbal medicine and their periods return to a normal, healthy bleed.
Mm.
Yeah, there are so many parts that it seems like a hidden mystery that of things that are going on the inside, and we need the wise women of old, if you like. We need that to be reconnected with grandmother medicine and helped. Anyway, yeah, I've gone off track.
No, please, please. I like the off tangent talks. It's great because it's all part of it, and the body literacy is really. I mean, I've seen how lacking it is, even in women that I look after who are pregnant, and they're still very unsure of what's going on. And I think it's a nudge to me of how much work is still needed to do with like fellow practitioners and those who are within the space of reproductive health. And again, like yourself, a lot of the clients I attract are normally like in their 30s or 40s. Many of them have been on the contraceptive pill for a long time. And then it dawned on me sort of back in like 2018, I was thinking, it's almost like we need to go back in time, because when the clients come to me, it's not that it's too late, but it would be great if we didn't have to like be dealing with the repercussions of having been on the pill for so long. So then in 2019, I did some work in schools. It was a campaign called Periods Not Pills, where we're going in a few schools just to raise awareness of, the beauty of having periods and not trying to shut it down. I thought if only we can go back in time and reach them when they're teenagers before they get offered the contraceptive pill. And it was so beautiful to see like some girls who, it's almost like the realization that, oh my gosh, so I can have a period and it doesn't have to be horrific, it doesn't have to be a traumatic experience. And you're not going to reach everybody, but sometimes just dropping the seed and just sowing a seed in their mind that they don't have to suffer. It's really, the idea is we don't have to suffer every month. I saw a comment on social media where one woman described it as, I feel like I'm being punished every month for not getting pregnant. And just the relationship and how we view our
Mm.
periods also has an impact on the pain, or the level of pain that we perceive to be happening to us. Changing the perspective and changing how we think about our cycles in the first place is, I think, the first step to healing, is not seeing it as this horror show that's that's coming to greet you every month. And that was really something that I learned having like done the work in schools, and we're hoping to do that again. But it's really just raising the awareness and just hoping that you get through to girls, and hoping that they just don't get sucked into the contraceptive pill rabbit hole.
I think that's when we first met, Rosemary. I think you'd just completed that brilliant campaign, Periods Not Pills. But I think I'm like you. I see a lot of women who are now in their 20s, 30s, and 40s. They've been on the pill maybe since they were 15, 16, communicating constantly with the ovary. This is now termed the hypothalamic pituitary ovarian axis.
Mhm.
And I think also there is that understanding that ovulation itself is a really significant act that leads to a whole nother set of hormone for the second half of the cycle. Lots of lovely progesterone, natural progesterone, not progestin, which is offered in tablet form. Natural human made progesterone is antispasmodic and anti-inflammatory and calming, and it keeps us calm just in case we might conceive at that second half of our cycle. But yeah, so often the conventional medicine might offer the approach of replacing hormones. Herbal medicine is very much about trying to get the body making its own. And so,
Mm.
yeah, that's a lot of my work, is helping the function and the natural tissue health of the ovary and the uterus and so on, to re-establish a really healthy cycle, and to then alleviate those symptoms and that have come about but have been preserved by, people. It's like being put into a sort of, a state of suspension to be on the contraceptive pill. People think they're having periods, but they're actually just having breakthrough bleeds. And again, I think it's just reaching out to people and letting them understand what the truth is behind what they're being offered.
You've made me think of something. And in terms of the contraceptive pill, what's really then happening over time, we're kind of creating a deficit. So when they get into sort of late 40s, 50s, all the contraceptive pill, the damage that it's done, it's stripped their body of its own minerals and vitamins, all the things, all the juicy hormones that we would need to sustain the later part of our lives. That's so that we don't get joint issues in our 50s, and we're not having issues with the skin, and our gut health isn't thrown off. So I like to describe it almost this analogy of making deposits every month that we're able to ovulate and have a natural healthy cycle is also contributing to later on in life, the savings, but the hormonal savings later on in life. And when you're on the contraceptive pill, there's a deficit, you're in the negative, because when you then get to when the menopause, it's worse than it should be. So again, there's this idea that the menopause is this really horrible stage of life, when it shouldn't be. Again, it should be a beautiful rite of passage, a beautiful celebration of life and womanhood in the next chapter of your life. In terms of your work with women who are experiencing menopause, what's your approach there? How do you approach that?
Yeah, you've set the scene beautifully, Rosemary, because that's exactly it, isn't it? That menopause is a moment of change and transition. It's the end of that reproductive phase. And so we can shed that layer. We don't have to carry that incredible miracle creating, but nevertheless, it's like carrying a fire around. It's sort of both a miracle, but also quite hard work to have those menstrual cycles. So, yeah, to go through into menopause is so often regarded in a negative way. But evolutionary biologists think that it is likely that our particular human species survived because of menopause. So it is actually built into us. We're meant to go through menopause, and we have everything in our body that we need to look after us after menopause. We can produce hormones and compounds ourselves that will look after our brain health and our heart health, our bone density, and our skin. But it's a little bit like you say, there's what happened leading up to that moment of great change when the baton is handed over. In that, are we on a firm footing? Are we experiencing chronic pain, chronic stress, chronic sleep deprivation, chronic inflammation, chronic infections, recurrent infections? Have we got lots of alcohol or things propping us up that are no longer going to serve us as we go through a really significant but beautiful change into the third phase of womanhood? Yeah, a lot of my work is about reminding women that they do have what they need. They may well have what they need. I do, as I say, I've worked with a gynaecologist for many years, and I do recognise that there are always going to be some people that experience really extreme versions
Mm.
of, of, of regular normal health. And so menopausal syndrome, yeah, or really, really early catastrophic menopause may well require hormone supplementation for a period of time, and anything to help those people be well. But most of us, yeah, it's more a case of becoming. How can we nurture our thinking and our bodies. So many herbs help us do that, whether it is adaptogenic herbs that help us cope with change, or whether it's herbs to actually specifically help the different tissues in our body that are involved in making postmenopausal hormones, those tissues being the liver, the gut microbiome, the nervous system, and the fat under our skin. And so, yeah, we need to just help and show people how they can nurture and nourish their body to be really effective at, at functioning at this time.
Mm. For the woman who's listening to this and thinking, well, I've been offered HRT, or maybe she's already on HRT and wondering if there's alternatives, what would you say to them?
Oh, yeah. I think there's been a necessary sort of backlash about it's a feminist movement, I think, hormone replacement or menopause hormone therapy. But I think it's slightly misguided in as much as it's still not giving women power necessarily. There are many women who cannot and should not take menopause hormone therapy. It's synthetic estradiol, no matter how bio identical it is synthetic hormone, and it's synthetic progesterone unless you don't have a uterus and ovaries. And so we need to remember that those things are going to have consequences in our body. But so many of us that have the capacity to navigate menopause, it is a change. And probably most of us do find change a little bit uncomfortable. But I think there is something really beautiful about working with somebody you can trust and finding out about yourself, actually turning on that, being present inside your body. And so you can explore, perhaps with guidance, but you can explore, hang on, what bits of me are not working here? What are those symptoms? What is the message of that symptom? Because hot flushes, to take one example, I think I so often put down to being a direct result of not having enough estrogen. But
Mm.
I think it's much more nuanced than that in estrogen levels. And its distress might be because it's busy dealing with inflammation. It's busy dealing with infection. It's tired because it's not sleeping. Its liver is congested because it's full up of drugs and alcohol, or a whole myriad of other. And so what I would love to say is that if you would like to explore that possibility that you could navigate through menopause completely using your body and without synthetic hormones, then don't be afraid. Go and find yourself a wonderful medical herbalist that you can work with. And maybe there are other therapists that also need to help you along the way. There might be healing, deeper psychological healing that needs to take place too, or physical therapy, or acupuncture, or reflexology, or even posture therapies like Alexander technique. There could be all sorts of therapies that could bring out the real you, because you're going to set the scene now for who you're going to be for the next few decades of your life. That's very exciting, and it might require some homework and some nurturing and some kindness and compassion.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. And not to mention, I think one area that we never really address, I rarely hear addressed when talking about the menopause, is thyroid health. We never
Mm.
think about its role and how it also helps regulate temperature and works with the heart to make everything else function. So if that's down because of all the excess stress and just the, burning fuel you don't have, like that's also going to be affected. We just, yeah, again, it's going back to that, only thinking of your body in isolation and not thinking of everything that is working to keep you going.
Yeah, menstruation, pregnancy, and menopause are so requiring of that interconnectedness of all body systems and not even, where do you even start with the hormones required to make a menstrual cycle? I mean, we're not even just talking about estrogen and progesterone. So
Yeah.
our hormonal system is a system, and it's completely integrated with itself and with every other part of our body, because after all, hormones, what are they? Chemical messengers. And the nervous system is neurological messaging. And plants have the capacity to work on messaging throughout our whole body as well. So herbal medicines interact with the membranes that we touch with those plants. So yeah,
Mm.
there's a lovely synergy there.
I like to think of it, Anita, like an orchestra as well. You've got this big band of just beautiful musicians, and just the harmony and the synergy and the music that they create. So these are how the hormones interact with each other. They just always working just seamlessly behind the scenes, just wonderful orchestra. But then if one is out of sync and kind of creating a note that just doesn't really blend with the rest, it can make the whole sound not so pleasing. It throws things off. And that's the same thing with our hormones. Like, most of them can be working so well, but then you've got one that just kind of, it's off on a tangent. It's not really aligning well and blending beautifully with the rest of them. And that might manifest itself in some kind of way, whether it's PMS or mood swings or, having headaches or things like that. So yeah, that's kind of how I like to also think about it.
That's an analogy that I find myself using as well. It is
Oh,
a
no.
hormonal orchestra, but isn't it interesting to consider that in our fertile years, that orchestra, the conductor, might be the pituitary, and the ovary is sort of lead violinist or whatever. Um, but that's the whole point. At menopause, there's this shift. Literally, the kind of conductor moves to the adrenal glands, and and is starting to operate a completely different section of the orchestra in a different way. It's a
Hmm.
good analogy because music requires harmony.
Music is beautiful. I know, like, I've looked after, I remember when I used to do home care, so living care with the elderly. Some were they weren't good sleepers. They're not usually good sleepers, and they might be asleep all day, and then at nighttime they suddenly come alive when you need to go and get your sleep. But there were some who just, in terms of their emotions, they were quite unbalanced. And I remember I always had classical music playing, and it almost just sent them into a trance. Like, it was just, and it was beautiful for me. I mean, I genuinely love classical music, but I got to see it firsthand how it actually affects of health, people who are fragile, vulnerable.
Different therapists and
Yeah.
musicians, because yeah, you're right. Mental health is, an under discussed and under nourished part of our society, and I think music would play a huge role there.
Yeah.
Oh, wouldn't that be gorgeous? So in hospital, you'd get beautiful food, you'd get a herbalist, you'd get a body worker, a psychotherapist, and a poet, and you'd also have a team of musicians as well.
Oh, who wouldn't recover under that? Like, come on, you'd have to get better. No, that's lovely. And Anita, you mentioned a while back adaptogens, and I love those group of herbs. What are your favorites? Because I know in terms of change as well, herbalists also, I mean, we are human beings. We also go through changes in our lives, and sometimes we need to seek healing. What are your favorite adaptogens, either maybe when you're working on yourself or working with others?
Well, students of herbal medicine who come to do clinical training with me at my clinic will know that I have a little book with a list of adaptogens, which is quite long, to nourish and therefore to bring out the best in a body tissue or organ. Um, but yeah, I mean, obviously, there are incredible plants like Siberian ginseng. Its scientific name of this plant is Eleutherococcus centicosus. This beautiful living being offers us its root as a stabilizing and kind force and walks with us, guides us in our everyday activities without overstimulating and without sedating. So, of course, I love this plant so much in my practice. I find it's a wonderful plant for women to experience at
Mm,
menopause. But I also love, I have a real passion for plants that grow here. I do have a Siberian ginseng plant growing in my
mhm.
garden. I
Oh,
can
no.
see it right now. It's just losing its leaves about now. But I do love wild oat. And
Mm,
it occurs to me that oat is a curious plant, isn't it? Like a grass. It has a slender, upright, thin stem and these delicate, drooping flowers um, that, once they are pollinated, produce a seed that we recognise as porridge oat, as oat.
mhm, mhm.
But the stem is the medicine for the herbalist, I believe. And sometimes it's called green milky oats, or
Mm,
sometimes it's called oat straw, because, of course, you would also, maybe as you harvest it, it might look like straw. But plants have this capacity to show us a little bit and of what their gift might be. And so if you think about an oat, that slender stem, and yet it's so strong,
mm.
it's graceful, it has, and yet it's also able to survive wind and rain, and it often works really well when it grows really well when it's in a group, collective,
Mm,
supported by its family. And wow, could that be a metaphor for
for life.
living?
Yeah.
Mhm.
No, that is beautiful. And in terms of just being supported as well, I think, yeah, very much so. We do best when we feel connected and we feel supported. And I can draw on that in terms of, especially after a woman has given birth, a lot of the reason why we see women sort of not do so well is when they don't have a support system around them, and it feels lonely when really birth is this is celebration of life and growth and this new chapter, a new season in a woman's life. And I'm not sure, I think it's a cultural thing as well, whereas in certain other cultures there's always someone around you, there's always aunties and grandmas, and whereas here we don't have that as much, I've noticed.
Mm. Yeah, I think there has been fragmentation, and I think so often our health is a metaphor for what's happening out in the wider world. Yeah, right the way through to what's happening to literally our Mother Earth. And,
Mhm.
we're wondering why cancer is so common, or why people are ill, and, what we do to the earth, we do to ourselves.
Yes.
And as well as having that sort of bond of community and, yeah, women's bonds, where I've been really interested in listening to a lot of the podcasts and writings and work done, people looking at the witch trials, for example, in Western Europe, and looking at how women have been demonized. And I feel like that, if you like, the ramifications of that are still
Mm.
working through into women's lives, where they're afraid of other women, they're afraid of themselves. Yeah, it's oh my goodness, there's a lot of healing. I think that's
Oh,
why we're herbalists. We want to be passed
yeah.
out for healing.
That is really true. And I think, on that note, like in especially as we move into the winter season, I think it's really important more so to make an effort to stay connected to people around us. Like I know I've had moments, I'm guilty of this, where I just want to just go into a cocoon and not deal with the world, not deal with just anything. You just want to kind of just hibernate and hide away. But I think more so when you do feel that way, it's even more reason and even more important to reach out and and just connect with people, connect with friends, and maybe meet up, even if it's just virtually. Because it makes a difference. I don't know if you've ever felt this way, where you're just kind of in your own world, and then when you do finally reach out to someone who may have been on your mind for a while, you get that reciprocated, and it's like, oh, there is life out there, and it just feels good to connect and to bond.
Yeah, that's so true, isn't it? It's like when you're really, really stressed, you know, the last thing you've got time for is a glass of water. But it's the very thing that you should be
That you need.
doing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Oh, Anita, I've thoroughly enjoyed this. Any sort of final thoughts you want to leave with us before I get you to share where people can find you?
Oh, thank you. I've talked a lot about how herbal medicine is very different to conventional medicine, but I have found enormous benefits to my patients by working with and alongside other conventional
Mm,
medical practitioners. And I do think there is a place for conventional medicine, of course, and but I think that since that occupies all of the state funding, and herbal medicine does not receive state funding, I think my message is to say that just because herbal medicine isn't state funded doesn't mean it's not a valid and important health model. It's a way of thinking as
mm,
well. It's not just about consuming plants, it's actually a different way of thinking. And so, what I'd love to say is that, yeah, if you're experiencing difficulties with your menstrual cycle, with the way that your body is in terms of its general health, with pregnancy, with menopause, that herbal medicine and a herbal practitioner could be a really worthwhile place to go, a
mm,
really interesting exploration. And hopefully, as a team, you can work together to bring about well-being, but also to any conventional practitioners out there, you know, there's a whole plethora of incredibly well trained medical herbalists out there. Reach out. Let's work together.
mm,
If you're a consultant of gynecology or oncology or gastroenterology or urology, you should be reaching out to work with a medical herbalist,
mm.
and you will find that we are really excited about helping our patients just like you are, and that we're actually pretty good at it too. So, yeah, I think my message would be that, yeah, whoever you are, let's reconnect with plant medicine in a way for the benefit of all.
I agree. I think more cross learning would benefit people as a whole. I mean, I work with doctors now, and many of them, when you do have sort of behind the scenes conversations, some of them are having fertility issues.
Mm.
And so there's a piece of the puzzle that's also kind of missing, and I think they would also benefit from learning a different way of thinking, as you said, a different perspective, what's going on, rather than rush into IVF as always the answer. I mean, women in their 30s who are thinking IVF, and well, what's been going on and where did the issues start? So yes, they are in this system where you it's drugs and surgery, and sometimes, like you said, there might be a place for that. And for some women, yes, there definitely is a place for that. But I also think for the majority of us, we don't need to be just going through IVF, and like that should not be, the state. I mean, once upon a time, if you go back to, I don't know if you watch Call the Midwife, but when women were having sort of 10, 15, 20 kids. And now, I see as a midwife, like for a woman to even have one, it's been such a journey and it's taken such a long time. And there's a reason that is happening. We need to kind of go back to basics as well, and a new way of thinking.
Yeah, I'm so excited that you have this podcast, Rosemary, and the work that you've done putting out there a message to young girls, to young people, to any people about the power of knowing about your body and about herbal medicine. It's only politics and ideology that are preventing medical herbalists collaborating much, much more with conventional practitioners. But I love my work. And somehow brilliant people find their way to me and they come and receive treatment. And it's such a pleasure and such a joy. It's always a wonderful thing.
It's beautiful when someone can say, I love my work. That's great. Thank you so much, Anita. Where can people find you and your amazing work? And if they want to get in touch to work with you, where can they find you?
Oh, thank you. Yes, my practice is called Medicine Tree. And so my website, medicinetreeherbs.co.uk, is a really good portal to find me. You can leave a message, send an email, or give us a ring at our beautiful little practice here in the south of England at West Malling. And also, you can find out more about courses about herbal medicine at Hartwood. Just look at Hartwood Education, Herbal Medicine, and you'll find a portal to learn more, whether it's a foundation course or even professional training. There's an opportunity to look there. And also just go to the National Institute of Medical Herbalists website. There's lots of information if you're just interested in finding a bit more about herbal medicine in general.
Thank you so much, Anita. I thoroughly enjoy this, and take care.
Thank you, Rosemary. I've loved it too. Every minute. Lovely to speak with you. Thank you.
I appreciate you for listening or watching. If you'd like to get in touch or have a story you'd like to share, I'd love to hear from you. You can reach us through our website, houseofrosemary.com, or on Instagram, House of Rosemary, where we share posts on herbs, periods, and pregnancy. Take care.